So I moved to New York. I knew two people here, and I had a temporary place to live, and got a really crummy job in the music industry managing a little studio that turned into a huge studio, and I met a lot of people and worked on lots of music and kind of made my way up the industry ladder, and I'm now a vice president at Universal Motown, and I oversee lots of different artists, and it's a really big job. I've been there for about 7 years. But when I came here, I decided that if I was going to live in New York, I wanted to live in Manhattan. I didn't want to cross rivers or go through tunnels. So that was kind of the deal I made with myself, that I would be in Manhattan. So about my son is now, I'm a single mother. My son is now 9 years old. And when he was born, we were living in the Village at 8th and Broadway. And I started looking at the different schools in the area and kind of settled on PS 234, which I thought was a really terrific public school. And he and I moved down there to 21 West Street to go to that school, which is specifically the reason we went down there. There were concerts and dances, performances of all sorts. The parks were amazing, community flower gardens. In every direction we walked from our apartment, there was some kind of a park. So it was a really, really great place to be for a kid. And I remember looking down and not seeing the buildings there, and it was so shocking. It was so shocking that they were gone. And seeing the smoke come up, and it was just impossible to believe. And it was a place that Will and I really enjoyed being, that we felt really proud to be in. It was a real community. There were a lot of people in the neighborhood that we knew. Everybody in the stores were people that we knew. And then at the school, there was just such a great camaraderie between the parents. It was really fun. A lot of artists, a lot of creative people that I felt a lot of simpatico with. We used to pick a direction. On weekends, Will and I would pick a direction and we would explore the neighborhood. And there was so much history down there. It's such an incredible place. There's Francis Tavern and Trinity Church and Wall Street, of course. Besides the parks and the marinas, and it was just fun. There were places to go hide in a garden and read a book. It was just a beautiful place, watching the river. I could look out my bedroom window and see the Statue of Liberty and the Jewish Holocaust Museum. I would see cruise ships go past, and it was amazing. It was really beautiful. My phone was dead, but I had my handheld BlackBerry with me. I was getting emails from people all over the world that I knew saying, "What's going on? Are you okay?" I got an email from somebody saying, "Are you alive?" And I started realizing that I probably had to let people know where I was, and that I was okay, and that I had Will. It was just such an odd feeling. I remember calling my boss and saying, "I don't think I'm coming to work today." That's such a Minnesota thing to do. He said, "No, I think it's okay. I think you can go home." And I thought, I can't go home. And it just all seemed so confusing and uncertain and terrifying. And I kept thinking about the kids and what they'd seen and how different everything would be for them after this. So that was the first day. I called my building that night. There was an emergency contact number that was left on the machine. And I called the emergency contact number because I wanted to see if there was, if they could tell me if the building was okay. As I knew by now, I'd left my window open. And I mean, I kept watching the news, but I didn't know if my building was okay or not. And I talked to this woman, and I said, do you have any information about 21 West Street? And she said, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, it's down by the World Trade Center. And she went, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. There are people who live down there. I was like, yeah, what are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go? And that was the beginning of a week of questions and calling people and wondering what we were supposed to do. I mean, it was very clear that we couldn't get back to our apartment. And I remember calling a helpline, and they said, well, you can go to one of the city's homeless shelters. And I kept thinking, yeah, I'm going to take a 7-year-old and sleep with crackheads in a homeless shelter. I don't think so. Everyone was confused. There was chaos. No one had answers. No one seemed to be talking to us, the residents. No one had information about when we could get back to our apartments. It was like being in some kind of war camp. It was really unbelievable. And I realized after the first day, I went to the deli and was trying to figure out what food to get for Will and I saw cat food, and I remember just bursting out in tears and thinking, I don't even know if she's alive. I don't know if she'll ever make it out. I remember just something that I think about every day is that life is so short, and you have no idea when something could happen to anyone. And it just all seems so precious to me now that I'm always trying to make sure that I give Will an extra kiss and that I let people know what I think about them or how I feel. It took about 5 days before I got back to my apartment. And every day was filled with trials and phone calls. And I was like, don't you know what happened here? Do you have any idea of what we're going through? She said, I can't really help you. And I think at that point I realized that there were so few people that had any idea of what was going on. The first time that there was any kind of a public meeting, I heard about it through the person who ran the after-school summer camp program, Camper Bob. He's a great community organizer, and he stood in a park in a little empty lot with a bullhorn and said, okay, people, this is what we know, nothing. This is what you can do. Here's a number for Con Ed. You can call and find out if you have power. And I'm thinking, what good is that going to do? I can't even get to my apartment. There was a number for the ASPCA, and I remember calling them and saying, I've got to get to my cat. My cat's down there. And they told me I could go to Pier 40, and that they were selectively taking people down to the buildings to get their animals. And I stood at Pier 40 for a couple of hours in the rain with a little cardboard box that they gave me with 2 friends of mine, waiting for them to say that they were going to my building, and they would take 5 or 6 people at a time to their buildings to get their pets and then bring them back up. And I waited and I waited. I got to Battery Park, and Battery Park was a military camp. There were tents up. The National Guard was there. And they were standing guard with machine guns. It's a really odd feeling to see your neighborhood, your corner, under patrol by the military. It was really, I guess at that point it wasn't even shocking. But it just seemed really surreal to me. And we had these little face masks on, but we were coughing and our eyes were burning and just felt sick the whole time. The smoke would come pouring over us. Finally, the National Guard was taking people by their buildings, to their buildings, and they would take one building full of people. There were probably 200 or 300 people waiting on the sidewalk. They had us in barricades like animals. So finally my building's turn came and they said, okay, when you get inside, you cannot take any pictures. You've got 5 minutes. You have to get back to us in 5 minutes and you'll be escorted out. And I finally got in to my building and there was still no electricity. And we were walking up these stairs. It was pitch black. There was no emergency lighting. And it just stunk. It smelled like I can't even begin to tell you from all the smoke, and it was horrible. We got to my floor. I was very thankful I was on the 4th floor. And opened my apartment. And it was like walking into Pompeii. Everything was covered with dust. My bedroom window had been open. There was my bed, unmade, with just dust all over it. And I could see where my cat had walked across the dresser in the dust. Just one little set of footprints. But she wasn't anywhere where I could find her until I went into my closet. She was hiding in the back of my closet. She hadn't eaten or had water. I could see one set of footprints going across the dresser, and then I saw a set of footprints into the living room, and there were rice cakes that my son had left out. And she had tried nibbling them, but she was really skinny and terrified. And, but she was alive. I just fell through the cracks, I feel like. And it was just so hard chasing the paperwork and the insurance forms and FEMA. And they also had no idea of the enormity of how many people lived down there. I think it was 50,000 that were homeless. That's a small town.
It's a pretty big town.
And nobody did anything. Everyone dealt with it in their own way. And there were some parents that were kind of like, oh, suck it up and get over it and get on. And I kept thinking, you can't say that if you didn't lose everything. I had to start over. It was so confusing. I'm still looking for things. And I'm still finding things that I thought I'd thrown away, and they suddenly turn up and I think, oh, I guess I kept that. I was in such shock while it was all going on. I didn't know what I had and what I didn't have. People at the school, everybody had a different experience, but most people, there were a lot of people displaced. And there were a lot of us showing up at the new schools with our own stories. People that didn't have clothes, people that were staying at hotels, and people that were staying with friends and staying in New Jersey. But here it is 1.5 years later, and I'm a whole mile north of where I was before, and I'm not in the community. I do think that most people don't understand what we went through. I remember seeing on the news that there was a tornado that wiped out a town in Tennessee, and I kept thinking about those people in a totally different way that I would never have understood before. And knowing what they were going through. Well, see, the first day you're in shock, the second day reality starts setting in. And you start scrambling and trying to figure out what you need and how you can keep going day after day.